Welcome to the Wonder Boldly podcast, hosted by yours truly, Christine, founder of Drizzle Academy. I am going to encourage and motivate you to take action towards your big goals. I'm going to teach you everything I've learned from building a very successful 25-year career, coaching people, and starting my own online business. I am going to give you so many action items you are going to be able to wonder boldly. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Wonder Boldly. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to my friend, Tiffany Paul. Now, let me tell a little bit of a backstory. So Tiffany Paul and we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I'm going to say it was 1.5 years ago. We met through a program that we were in together. And I have to tell you, I forget what I even said in my introduction. You know, we've all been in those groups, and you get set up in the Facebook group and you're like, introduce yourself. And I introduced myself, or I said something. And for whatever reason, this amazing person reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to chat about that? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why I joined these things. This lovely person. So we set up a call and we just talked where I was, where she was, and she was encouraging me at that time. I was sort of newish, definitely new to the program that we were in. And we just sat and really had this awesome conversation. And I thought, what a generous person to reach out to a complete stranger at the time and say, hey, let's just sit down and chat. And since then, I've been following along on her journey, been part of her story in the program that we were in. And I've just been like really inspired and so impressed. And one of the things we're going to talk today about is the fact that, let's be real, when we talk about entrepreneurship or we talk about taking action and taking that leap, it is not all glamorous, and it definitely takes work. And I know my audience, I know you know this, and I also know you like to hear other stories. So I am so happy to welcome Tiffany Paul. She is the host of the Dream Life podcast, the founder of Slept Life, and the inventor of the sleep scarf. Is that right? What is sleeper scarf?
The sleeper scarf. Yeah.
The sleeper scarf. And we will get into that, and she'll tell you all about that. I would call her a true entrepreneur who has come, let's say it as it is, who has come from corporate. So in my world, she is sort of the epitome of the folks that I sort of navigate to. So she's been in corporate, she's an entrepreneur, she's had her challenges, she's open to sharing them, which I love. And she's really just honest about where she is right now. So I am so happy to have you. Thank you so much for making this time for us, Tiffany. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your story as we kick off this interview, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I loved connecting with you back then and staying in touch with you all this time. As you mentioned, I just really like to get really honest about taking the leap because I want so many to feel empowered to do so. And I think while there are so many inspiring stories, that sometimes we miss some of the nitty gritty, the ups and downs. And I think when we can lay it all out there, how challenging and hard it can be, sometimes knowing what you're getting yourself into is enough to make you feel as though you are strong enough and capable and strong and smart and experienced enough to take that leap. And so when I reach out to you, it's all because like I want to see people take that leap. It's like truly like my heart and soul. And so my background is I came from corporate. I spent 10 years there. You know, I had the 6-figure salary. I was married. I had 2 kids under 2. On paper, I had it all, but there was still something missing. And I think so many people probably tuning in can relate, right? It's like on paper, I have so much and yes, so grateful, but my soul is whispering. There's something more. My heart, whatever you want to call it, wants a little bit more to this thing we call life. And so I took the leap in 2019 to being a full-time entrepreneur with my first invention, which was the sleeper scarf, which is a 2-in-1 scarf and neck pillow. So I created it because I traveled a lot for work and I was getting bored at work at the time. And so I was like, why not, create a side hustle? hustle. I think it's the best way to keep your corporate job a little bit longer if you are getting bored, is to do something on the side. Again, I'm sure so many can relate. I know you can relate. And I took that leap. And as you know, the travel space completely came to a halt in 2020. So Sleeper Scarf was a multiple six-figure business and came to zero revenue overnight. And I really had to scramble and pivot quite quickly. So talk about your worst case scenario, right? Like on paper, I did not have pandemic listed out as my worst case scenario. So not only did my worst case scenario come true, I think it was worse than my worst case scenario. So that's a little bit of background about myself. I guess the only thing I'll add in, keeping it real, is that in order to take that leap, leaving that kind of salary behind, I had to downsize my life. So my house, my car, my spending, like everything was on a very tight budget. So when this dream came crashing down, it wasn't just the pain of the dream coming crashing down. It was like I literally had a completely different lifestyle and I could barely even fund that. So a lot of financial stress, a lot of burden to carry, but I have come out the other side. And I know for a fact that anybody that has any challenge that comes forward will come out either with a lesson or, a success if you just keep on going.
Yeah. And that's so it's funny and not funny, but how you said you didn't have pandemic on your risk list. Like we all kind of put out the risk and how can we mitigate the risk and how would you have ever known, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh. So I think one of the things that really stood out for me in that story, and I'm sure my audience, is that was a really successful business.
Yeah.
And how did that happen? Tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. So that had been 5 years in the making, alongside my corporate job to get it to that level. And it was just consistency taken over time, evenings and weekends, but I love doing it. And I think that the key to being consistent over time is that you have to love what you do. And I also was obsessed with the idea of one day leaving my job, right? So I think that fueled me to keep going long enough. A big win for us in particular was we got into airports. So that was nationwide distribution, which took years. Another big win was our partnership with Uncommon Goods, which is a gift retailer. And they just did really well with the product. I mean, it's uncommon, a 2-in-1 scarf and neck pillow. It's a patented product. It's the only one out there. And so it was those 2 points of distribution that really attributed to 90% of, or 85, 90% of our sales. Also something to keep in mind. It's like we put all this action forward, but sometimes it's just like that one win. There were many times where I was moving forward and I was like, this business isn't profitable or I'm losing money. I lost money for the first few years, actually.
And that's so interesting. So many questions there. So myself, and I know my audience, were really like into details.
Yeah.
So how does one know, in your example, there's so many examples, but in your example, how does one know how to even get into airports or how to even reach out to Uncommon Goods or, how does one do that?
Yeah. And that's what I love about entrepreneurship is that you never know. You don't pick a business that you know everything or you would just be an entrepreneur already. Right. And as you grow, there's always something new to figure out. And so I think when you approach the mystery of it as an adventure, I think that's, again, the way you can have the longevity, because there are days too where I got overwhelmed with like, just, you never know anything. And I was like used to my corporate job where you just know everything, right? This is the process. This is how I grow my business. I'm an expert in this. And you have this space where you're an expert. And I had 10 years at the time, when I left, your job, like the back of your hand, you could do it in your sleep. Versus being an entrepreneur, it's like, how do I make this work? How do I make this profitable? How do I get people to come to my website? How do I convert? How do I even have a pattern? How do any of it? You just never know. It's just a lot of Google network. And I think that for me, it was just knowing one person in the space is all I really needed. I had a friend who had a clothing business. And from the beginning, I was like, how do I even get this made? And she was like, well, you need a pattern maker. And I was like, well, duh, now. But at the time, I had no idea.
Yeah. Why would you?
why would I know? And then I was like, well, where do you get a pattern maker?
Mm.
And so she introduced me, right? You could probably Google it, that same thing. I just happen to know somebody, but it's just one step at a time. And then
Mm.
I started manufacturing locally here in the US because I wanted to keep my minimum smaller. And this is just like a tactical piece of advice if anybody's
Mhm.
tuning in with a manufacturing idea, is
Mhm.
that, there's this idea of like going overseas to get your costs down to create a profitable business. But if you bring it locally, and you sell it for even the exact price you're making it and don't make any money just to prove the concept,
Okay.
that's what I ended up doing. And that was part of
Okay.
the reason I kind of lost money at the beginning, is that instead of putting big amounts of money up front to go overseas and then
Yeah.
carry the inventory, I just manufactured in small batches here locally. And slowly over time, the sales grew. And then I took my manufacturing overseas. And that's where finally, maybe around year 3, I started seeing a profit.
Oh, cool. That is so interesting. Okay. So did you do the same thing? So for the slept life, I'll bring you there.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. That's really, really interesting. And my brain was going, so I was trying to keep up with you. I loved that. So, okay. So with a slept life, did you apply that there, and maybe tell the audience a little bit? Cause I keep saying the slept life, but tell them about the slept life.
Yeah. So the Sleep Life is a curated sleep marketplace with all my favorite things online for sleep. With my second child, I had like major insomnia. So
Mhm.
I couldn't like take any medication because I was pregnant. So I was like an expert on researching all the things to sleep better. And so when my business collapsed, I essentially created an online marketplace with all those things that I was wholesaling, or I was buying wholesale. So there are retailers like fair.com, FAIRE.com, where you can buy products wholesale and resell them. And then
Okay.
also, yes, leveraging my manufacturing contacts, knowing that, a pattern is needed and a tech pack and all the things. I had an idea for our own line of satin weighted eye masks. And so we also produced our own products underneath that other umbrella. And I think the important thing to note there for anybody listening is that, I think the beginning parts, the early parts of being an entrepreneur, and I say like the first 5 years, it's so much just test and learn, test and learn. And like failure and setbacks are part of the process. But eventually you get so much experience that even if your business is taken away overnight, you can like rebuild quite quickly, which is what I did with the Slept Life. But just in the early stages, being open to just learning through trial and error and learning through failure. That is the only way I got to even a remote level of success, is like sending a million emails with no response until one day somebody responded, or like losing a bunch of money on marketing initiatives, or, manufacturing run that wasn't up to the quality I needed. Like the only way you learn is through mistakes and being really graceful with yourself. It just takes time, and mistakes and failures and setbacks are all part of the process. It's like the school of entrepreneurship is a lot of wasted money and time.
Right. And I would say, and I'm interested in what you would say, I would say it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
I find it fun in the sense of like, yes, there's challenges and all of that. And my audience knows I have a corporate job. I'm very fortunate for that. And I do this, the typical side hustle, my additional. So I can say that it's fun. And so right now, so just to paint that picture, maybe fun's not the right word, maybe exhilarating. That feels
Yeah.
better, like
Mhm.
exhilarating. And personally, I love to learn. And I think that is one of the strongest things from an entrepreneur perspective, being open and
Yeah.
being willing to learn and willing to know that you're going to step into things. You don't even know the questions you should be asking. You have no idea. But in order to find out, you have to take that action. And I'm interested, what are your thoughts on that? Like, are you like, no, Christine, you're crazy, it's not fun at all? Or, what are your thoughts on that perspective?
Yeah, I think it's all about perspective. And that's again why I'm so passionate about talking about the challenges and the setbacks and the constant failures and wasted money and wasted time. It's not, none of it's really wasted. It's about having a perception around it. Because if you just look at it like, I'm a failure, this didn't work out, this launch didn't hit my target, I spent all this money, that's not fun. And that's not empowering. And that's not, living out your best life, which to me is when you talk about living the dream, if you're miserable and being hard on yourself every day, that's not worth it even. No amount of success is worth a miserable life, in my opinion. And so I think that it is about a reframing of like looking at your business as like a test and learn. And like, if you waste a lot of money, then well, okay, how can you stop for a second? Maybe you need to get a side gig and save up some more money so you can test and learn again. But it's only through like my constant test and learning and getting back up from those failures instead of taking them personally that allowed me to keep it fun and keep going. And so just knowing that that is literally part of the process, not anything you're doing wrong. Like, how would you know how to build the business you've never built? And also, I know there's a lot of great coaches and courses and podcasts and books out there. Like I inhale all those, but at the same time, nobody can give you the exact formula for success. Right. It's just not realistic because you are not them. You don't have the same network. You don't have the same budget. You're not in the same circumstance. Your business is not going to look exactly like theirs. It's not the same time period as when they started theirs. There's so many variables that even if somebody gives you their playbook, yes, you can pick and choose and learn from certain pieces, be inspired by certain results. But ultimately, like, no one has the answers to your success story besides you. And the only way you're going to get there is by taking the first step and then the next and the next and the next, crying and then getting back up again, failing and then like celebrating a small win. And so just releasing the fact that you're ever going to know like how to get from point A to point B, but knowing that you're so excited and lit up by the idea of creating this life for yourself or reaching this goal is more important than figuring out how.
Yeah, I think that that's so great. And I think that I really like how you frame that in the sense of failing and crying and getting back up. So many folks that I talk to, and myself included, I mean, there are days, weeks, whatever, that we like to use the term flat. I'm feeling flat because so sure, there are those folks that try and they'll feel like they failed and they won't continue. Sure, absolutely. And there are those folks like myself, and I feel like you and the folks that I chat with that, yep, they fail and then they get back up, and neither right or wrong for that other person. That's their journey, right? And they decide to go a different way. And to get back up, to like fail. And we kind of call it like flat. Like, I know I'll talk to my coaches or talk to my clients and be like, and then they'll say, because we talk on Voxer, right? So some of them, so they'll be leaving a Voxer for me and they'll be like, I know I sound really, defeated and, I'm not giving up. That's just where I am right now, and living. And it's so funny because you live in those moments. And I swear, in my experience, the first one is long. The second one is long, a little bit shorter. And as you more and more you go through it, of course, the bigger I don't want to even use the word failure, but let's just use it. The bigger the failure, you feel like it's a failure, the harder you fall, right? You do build up that resilience. And I think that speaks a lot to some of the stuff we talked about before recording, was our own stories, right? Our own stories of resilience. Our lives have set us up to where we are now. They'll set us up to where we are tomorrow. My audience knows my story. I did a podcast on it where my husband had a heart attack and I'm in the ER and I'm like a split second of, the doctor saying he's having a heart attack, oh my God. And then right into action, right?
Yeah. That
didn't come from nowhere. That came from my history of trauma and living through other trauma. And how does one do that? And so the next and the next, and hopefully there's not another one for the record. But we all know.
Right? That reminds me of this similar story where my husband came home with he went to go get LASIK and the doctor was like, you have this degenerative eye condition, it's just going to progressively get worse. And I'm like, he's like, I'm going to go blind. I'm not going to be able to see our firstborn. I was like, what is happening? And I was like, no, in it is, I'm like, I do not accept this. I'm just Googling, finding the best doctor. There's a doctor out there. There's a fix. There's a cure. And I found a doctor. He lived in Beverly Hills. We were in Orange County. I was like, there is a doctor. Insurance doesn't cover it because it was this really weird, abnormal thing. It was $20,000. It was so expensive. Thankfully, that was our emergency fund. I was like, we have the money. I don't give a F about spending it on your eyes. That is what it's for. Right. But it was I didn't even think about it. I was just Google, found a doctor, spend the money, done. I wasn't oh my God, wasting that time and all the things that could go wrong or obsessing over how we could have spent that money or whatever. It was just you go into action. And we talked about earlier, like that's just in our DNA. That's like, I came from a tough childhood as well. And so it's like, we just learn that, but not everybody has that. And I think that everybody has various levels of their ability to act and have so much grace with yourself. I always tell my husband, who is unlike me, to never compare himself to me, because we all have our own threshold for risk and ability to act. And the fact that you can even take one small step forward is a celebration, because look around you. Like anybody listening, most people are just going through the same motions and actions they went through the day before. There are a handful that are taking those small steps forward in a different direction. And so I want you to be so proud of yourself in even the small steps that you take forward, and acknowledging that, because so many of us live most of our lives in these comfort zones, in these comfortable lives that we've created for ourselves, because we couldn't sustain ourselves long term if we were living in like a crazy ass life, right? Once you become an adult, most of us listening here have created some sort of comfortable life for ourselves. And so because of that, have so much grace with yourself that anytime you even put a toe outside of that comfort zone, that might feel like crazy uncomfortable. And so just knowing that that is normal. And if you're going to be stepping outside of that comfort zone, it's like why they call it the comfort zone. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to want your ego, and the part of you that loves the safety is going to want to suck you back. As a result, you're going to doubt yourself. You're going to feel frozen in fear. And the best way I know how to push past like that fear and the uncomfortability is just to continue focusing on those teeny tiny small actions. And over time, like you start to prove to yourself, like I can do this. And then that becomes the evidence to take the larger steps and make the larger decisions, like maybe leaving your corporate job or starting the business or leaving your relationship or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So I love how you said that. I think a really good place to start, like you said, Tiffany, is to look at those struggles that you faced and telling yourself, okay, my husband with his, you could have spiraled and been like, he's going to go blind. He's not going to see our kids grow up. He's not going to be at our daughter's wedding, walking her down the aisle, being able to see, whatever, like we can all spiral, but really looking at how can I take my strengths? And so what you did was you're like, and you talked about this earlier, I know how to Google. I know I'm resourceful. I can figure this out. We are going to figure this out. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that is the key when I say focus on yourself. I'm not talking about like selfish and disregarding everybody. And my audience knows that. But like, what are the strengths we have in the situation that it's needed? And in that situation, you told that story about your husband, those strengths you had were needed and you were able to apply them there.
Yeah. And I think bringing back to like touching on the self-prioritization piece, I just want to double down there, because I also think talking about, I like how you distilled it down to just an approach that you can figure this out, and a belief that you will figure it out. A. B, I think putting yourself first is 100% the key to the success that I've had, like in my business, but in my life. And when we talk about living the dream, if you listen to my podcast, Dream Life, you will hear me talk about over and over again that it's about creating a life that you love living. It's not just about the end goal. And so going back to your point about if you are living comfortably in a safe, secure job and you are happy, that is your dream life. Like a dream life is not just taking the leap out of corporate America. It's not just building the business or going to Bali or whatever. It's whatever you need in your life to create a happy, full life. And I just really fully at my core believe that you cannot do that if you do not on some level put yourself first. And I think again, today's the age we have to like add caveats to everything. It's like, oh, but somebody could say, but what about your kids and your whatever? It's like, you think I'm not going to be a good mom? You think I'm not going to show up and have their best interests in mind? Of course I am. I think that comes so naturally to do what our boss says, or be, or take care of our children. Like we're all doing that. So to say that self-prioritization is somehow going to like, you're going to stop picking your kids up from school or like ignoring your husband or stop getting your job done is ridiculous. We need to stop adding the disclaimer on like self-prioritization is not selfish. It's just somehow you think your dreams are going to happen without you putting yourself first. It's not going to happen. Sorry. Nobody's thinking about your dreams. Just like you're not thinking about anybody else's dreams. I don't go to bed thinking about your dream, Christine. I maybe will think a little bit about my husband's dreams, my kids' dreams, but not to the extent I think about my life all day long. So you have to put yourself forward. You have to find the things that light you up, that fill you up, that your soul is demanding of you, or there's no way you're going to get to a point that you like are actually looking at your life and you're like, I'm happy, if you continue to suppress what you need and what you want and what you like, what your dream life is. So I just want to like go off on that tangent real quick because
I love it.
I think that you really broke it down as far as the mindset of everything is figure outable. There's a book on that, right?
Right.
And then also putting yourself first. And it doesn't need to be all day, every day. It's just like having those moments of time. You're like, I deserve this time for me, or I believe in myself enough to go for it. Whatever that looks like, I really believe you can't create your dream life if you're not putting yourself first, because you'll just be depleted, exhausted, and stressed out and resentful. And that's not a dream life. Even if you have all the money, all the success in the world, at least from my viewpoint.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love how you just went off on that. That is so good because you're so passionate about it. It's so true. And voices like yours will help in that. When I'm saying put yourself first, it means put yourself first, look at what you want, your dreams. And of course, you're still being a good wife, a partner, a mother, a father, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. I could go on and on about that. Thank you so much for that. That was awesome.
Yeah, no. And I just want to add on about that. What you just said is that, it's really easy when somebody, like if you have a different opinion, it feels like an attack on you, but it's actually not an attack on you. So let's say you're listening and you're like, no, I fully believe that I need to put my kids and my husband first. Then we just agree on different belief systems. It's not actually an attack on you. And hopefully you don't like hate me because I think differently. And I think the more we are just open to the idea that we all go through life with their own perceptions and experiences, we're okay with that. We just let it go. But I refuse to dim down my light and not speak my truth, because I know that there is somebody out there that needs to hear the importance of putting themselves first. And I think there's all of this conversation around self-care is the answer, but systems that are literally like exhausting, self-care is not enough. Like it needs to be an entire mindset change in putting yourself first. And if you are a parent out there, I know that a lot of us are raising these children to have dreams and reach for the sky. Would you also tell them until you get married, until you have kids, and then give it all up and then just support them? If you look at that cycle, no dream would ever come into fruition, because everybody would give it up for another person, somebody else's priority. And so I believe you can simultaneously put yourself first and be a really good parent, wife, partner, employee, business owner.
Yep. Thank you so much for that. So I think in all the messaging, what I hear you saying is, yes, put yourself first. Yes, if you are interested in being an entrepreneur, it is challenging for sure. And self-confidence and, failing and picking yourself up and moving forward are the stepping stones to moving forward. And I didn't even use the word success. And we talked about that a little bit before, but whatever success means to you, that in order for that to happen, you need to take action. Whatever that action is, it can be, maybe I'm interested in starting my own business. Maybe I am interested in starting a community of folks who are interested in knitting. It doesn't matter, but taking the steps to make it happen. And knowing that along that way, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. It's going to hurt. There are going to be tears. There are going to be bad days. And then on the other side of that, you are building a stronger and stronger foundation for yourself that you, like you said, Tiffany, and I loved it, you can leverage it for the next thing. Yeah. Right. And in my story about the heart attack, like leveraging my earlier experiences with, that situation, all of our life experiences, if we are in tune to them, if we take the time to look and really see, they are lessons for us to learn from and move forward. So thank you so much, Tiffany. I loved your messaging. This sort of we weren't really sure, right? We're like, what do we want to talk about? And I love when this happens. It's just so conversational. Please tell my audience how they can find you and where they can find out more about your sort of philosophy. I think it's really powerful and helpful.
Yeah, this is so much fun. I love just catching up with a girlfriend and podcasting all at the same time. My podcast is called Dream Life with Tiffany Paul. And so not only do we keep it real about the journeys to chasing big dreams, we really challenge listeners to redefine success and what does living the dream look like for themselves beyond just the societally defined definition of the house, the car, the bank account, the kids, all the things. Like, what do you actually want if you were to take away from, the stories and kind of the conditioning that we're all subjected to just as part of life? And it's okay to want big things and money, but is there something else you want in your life? How do you want to feel? And so we just have a really great variety of speakers on, from spiritual speakers to entrepreneurs and my friends. So all the things. Dream Life with Tiffany Paul is my podcast. And then on Instagram, you can keep up with me at Tiffany Nicole Paul. And then if you need some sleep goodies, thesleptlife.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. It was so great to catch up.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, continue to wonder boldly.